In Chapter 7 of your textbook, Weston Turner discussed the important role that emotions play in our understanding of our relationships and ourselves. Thus far, we have discussed perception, culture, verbal communication, and nonverbal communication, and listening. Now we are directing our attention to emotions. You have read Chapter 7 and are familiar with what emotions are and can readily identify them. Now you will apply that knowledge and understanding to Paper 2. Similar to Paper 1, Paper 2 requires that you identify a scene from a movie that you believe best demonstrates 4 of the 6 characteristics of emotions. You will provide a sentence or two describing the general theme or point of the film, and then a discussion of each characteristic. Please be sure to choose a scene from a film that is number 1, different from the film that you chose for Paper 1. And number 2, make sure that you use the same scene throughout this paper. That will make it easier for you. As with Paper 1, Paper 2 is 4 to 6 pages in length, and you cannot fall under 4 pages, and you should not exceed 6 pages. The cover page does not count in the page total. There are 3 parts of the paper: the description of the scene, which is worth 10 points, the definition of the characteristic and analysis of the scene, which is worth 80 points. You're choosing 4 characteristics, and 10 points will be assessed for the definition of that characteristic, and then 10 points for the analysis of that scene, totaling 80 points. And then there is the third section, which is the conclusion. The paper must be submitted to the assignment drop box in ELC New, and you want to make sure that throughout the paper you are bolding the section headings and the 4 characteristics you have chosen to focus on in this paper. The paper requires that you choose a scene from a different movie that illustrates each of these characteristics. And when I say different movie, I'm emphasizing that it is different from the movie that you chose in Paper 1. The characteristics of emotions are: number 1, that emotions are subjective experiences; number 2, they are valenced experiences; number 3, experiences that lead to physiological arousal; 4, emotions are experiences that lead to thought interruption; 5, emotions are experiences that produce behavioral responses; and 6, emotions are adaptive responses to changes in the environment. The first characteristic is subjectivity. It refers to the fact that emotion is a feeling that is private and subjective. This means that the experience of emotion can vary from person to person. 2 or more people can be participating in the same event and have very different emotions. For example, in your scene, a character just learned about her admission into college. She's really happy, but her parents are a little sad. This was a positive life event for them all, but the parents' emotional responses are different or subjective because of their sadness over their child becoming an adult and moving away from home. The child is happy because they have a new adventure to face. The second characteristic is valence. Valence means that emotions are on a continuum and refers to whether the emotion reflects a positive or a negative feeling. If you are experiencing or expressing a positive emotion like joy, then that would be positive valence. And anger would be an example of negative valence. The third characteristic, physiological change or arousal, means that emotional states can be defined by particular constellations of bodily responses. Specifically, these responses involve autonomously innervated visceral organs, like the heart or stomach. So, when an emotion is experienced, it is possible for someone's body to naturally respond through a change in the body, such as a rapid heartbeat, sweaty palms, and a churning stomach they are experiencing as a result of fear. The fourth characteristic is thought interruption. When we experience an emotion, it will orient us to the current situation. In other words, our current attention or thoughts are interrupted and we begin to focus on the emotion and think about something else. For example, your character in the film is feeling angry until they are given good news about something else. Their new emotion of happiness has interrupted their anger and their angry thoughts and has caused them to shift their thinking. So the new emotion of happiness has interrupted their thought process. The fifth characteristic, behavioral expression, is very simple and refers to the experience of an emotion that leads to some behavioral response, like crying, smiling, or yelling. So, your character is happy and expresses this emotion through excitedly clapping their hands or jumping up and down. The sixth and final characteristic is adaptive responses. Adaptive responses are emotions that occur as reactions to changes in our environment. An example of this is when the same character is alone in a house and is caught off guard when another character appears out of nowhere in the house. Out of fear, the character takes off running to another part of the house because they are now in survival mode. Their adaptive response to fear is to run. So, now that you've watched the film, you have an understanding of what the 6 characteristics are of emotions. You will write your paper. So I'm going to recap for you how the paper should be organized. The paper should be written in 6 brief parts. Part 1 should describe the scene or scenes from the movie. Again, I recommend just using one scene. Each of the 4 remaining parts of the paper should follow the same format. Each remaining section should include a definition of the characteristic. The definition should be in your own words, and it should describe the characteristic. Be sure that in this section of the paper, you are going to present one characteristic, defining it and explaining it, and then analyzing the scene where this emotion is present. After you've described the first characteristic, you'll then shift to the second characteristic, defining it and analyzing the scene, and so on. So you'll present the characteristics in the same format, with 1 being presented first, 2, 3, and then 4. So as I mentioned before, each section should also include a brief discussion of how the film or television show that you have chosen illustrates and is an example of that characteristic of emotion. Make sure that each section of your paper is labeled and includes an explicit definition of the characteristic of emotion in your own words, and that you have provided a brief analysis of the scene in the movie as it relates to the characteristic you have defined. The goal of the paper is to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding of these characteristics of emotions and how they impact our interpersonal interactions. By applying 4 of the 6 characteristics to your chosen film, you're showing that emotions are a process and are a natural part of communication. We hope that this assignment has helped you in how you approach emotions in your relationships and your understanding of yourself. If, for some reason, you are not able to get in touch with me, which you should be by this point, the backup plan, as it is for all other assignments, is to contact our office manager, Jason Long, and his number, office number, and email address are provided on the screen and in your syllabus. I would also like to emphasize that your assignment should be thorough and complete, and you should also make sure that your paper is very organized and structured. The penalty points that are assessed to your paper are consistent with those from paper number 1. So make sure that you have no typographical errors or spelling errors. Make sure that your grammar is clear and complete, and I'm sure you should do fine on your paper. Good luck on paper 2.